Hi everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in with me for part 3 of my story. I first of all want to thank you from the core of my heart for the amount of support and encouragement and everyone liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing. I can't thank you enough for choosing to be here with me on my journey, which is incredibly meaningful to me to do and put out there in the world. It's I've said at the beginning, it's been a long time coming, and I mean that more than ever now, because as time will go and you learn more of my story and more unfolds over my life of what's happened and transpired in the last 45 years. You'll come to discover that it was even 4 to 5 years ago when I had decided that I would write a book about my experience in the Jehovah's Witness cult and my getting out of it, and my surviving, my being able to come out, decondition myself, and recreate a life for myself with a family that loves me, and where I'm fully supported, and not just loved, but being loved unconditionally, knowing that I'm loved for who I authentically am, and not because I'm doing something or being forced to do things in order to be given love, as very much as we've seen this religion operates. It's very conditional, and all the comments have been reflecting that, and I can't thank you enough for sharing with me and commenting, and some of you are really going into detail on your comments about even some of your lives and the correlations of mine to yours and stuff like that. And don't underestimate how much that means to me. I take time to read through all of the comments. It's overwhelming. I haven't been able to respond to everyone's comments yet, but I would like to. And if you fall through the cracks somewhere, some way, please forgive me. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So here I am going to continue on with part 3 of the story. And if you are just tuning in and haven't seen any of the other videos yet, then I'll quickly update you in that I was raised in the Jehovah's Witness religion. I left when I was 27, and just to catch you up, I had fallen into some wrongdoing a second time. Was thinking I was going to be disfellowshipped, wasn't. And my father, who professes to be one of the anointed 144,000, upon hearing that I had been forgiven by Jehovah and the organization, he was still not able to bring himself to come to the phone to speak to me, to give me support, to listen, anything at all. He did not come to the phone. And when I persisted in calling for a few months, and then my stepmother eventually confessed to say that he wasn't ready to come to the phone, I went inward and I reflected on this, what this meant for me. And as you know, I had been battling all my life with lesbian tendencies and had repressed them willingly for Jehovah, for the organization. And then I finally had this thing, and this fling, and got in trouble, was forgiven, and my father didn't speak to me. The elders in the congregation where I was were trying very quickly to give me my privileges back. And before I really move on in my story, I'd like to just touch on this point about how the elders were trying to give me my privileges back, get me to go in service again, get me to pray, get me to comment, give talks. After 1 month of my going forward with my issue that I had. Now, During this time, 1 month in, I was still very estranged from my roommates, and I was obviously going to the meetings, but it was difficult because basically the meetings were held in a living room. And at that time, at the end, when I was preparing to leave Buffalo Narrows, there was a couple in the congregation that were the parents of the other elder that was there, the parents of the wife of the elder that was there. So those two elders, two wives, and then the two sisters that I was living with. So it was very close to home, attending these meetings, going, commenting, not commenting, stuff like that. So when they were trying to push me into participating again and jumping back on the horse, if you will, I hesitated, and I told them I wasn't ready. As you heard in the last video, I was quite adamant, actually, about not wanting to be pushed before I was ready. And I even told the elders, I said, I am very conflicted in my heart. Some days I am all up in reading the Bible and wanting to give my all and be right there with it, right back where I was in my heart, And then the next day, the very next day, I could be absolutely enraged with anger over everything that was happening in my life. Especially if you fast forward a bit to the point where I realized that my father was purposely not speaking to me. I didn't know it just 1 month after. But I was alone, and I was having a lot of very negative thoughts, as I had mentioned in the last video as well, about myself. And it was very difficult, because while I had done the right thing according to the religion and come forward, confessed my crime, I was going through a depression at the same time, which obviously brought the suicidal thoughts, because when I was looking at myself in the mirror, as I mentioned in the last video, I was searching my heart to know really who I was, and having the tendencies I had all my life. And then finally, ultimately acting on them in that lesbian relationship I had. Even though I had come forward about it and confessed and was trying to get back to where I was struggling with the fact that if this is truly an evil practice, something that Jehovah absolutely does not tolerate at all, I was very much struggling with the fact that I knew I was like this from as long as I can remember. And I thought to myself, why? Why would God create me like this? Why would I be created with these feelings for women? I felt like I really had so much good in my heart, and love and life and joy. So this is in part actually what brought on the suicidal tendencies, because I thought, how would I ever truly be able to please Jehovah and be truly accepted when deep in my heart and soul I knew that I had this attraction to women? But ultimately, you know what I decided? I decided I was worthy. And especially once we fast forward a little more to the point where my dad did not come to the phone or even want to speak to me for that matter, for whatever reason it was, he was ultimately disappointed in me, obviously. So when this happened, when he didn't come, and I measured that along with everything else that was happening regarding my feelings with women, and then ultimately realizing that my father, being one of the anointed 144,000, was finding it difficult to forgive me, his daughter, despite my remorse. So coupled with, even though ultimately it was my father who left, or not left, but my father who, even though it was ultimately my father who did not come to the phone, and that was the initial tipping me over the edge and realizing that this is not in fact a religion based on true unconditional love. Especially once I started reflecting on the fundamentals of the religion, and that, you know, to behave in a Christ-like fashion, it was just the opposite. What he was doing was the absolute opposite of what Jesus would do. That's when I really kind of decided in my heart and soul that there's something truly wrong. And I started remembering details that I had questioned in my past growing up. Even as young as a child, I had questioned things about the religion that didn't add up to me. And so all of these things were coming back now, you know, on the cusp of my dad not coming to the phone and realizing what that meant, and me internally feeling, you know, knowing in my heart and soul that I am in fact gay, but that this is evil, and that I'm condemned by God because of that. And then really searching in my heart and soul, not feeling evil, and feeling like I have a lot of good to give. And then when I remembered those little thoughts and facts about the past, the little things that would make me wonder, and the answers that I was told was always, well, that's just the way it is. If Jehovah wants us to know more, he'll let us know. And so there was always things that popped up, because again, in my mind, it equaled love. So I was living in this and living in accordance to this religion based on the love that it was about, you know? So when I was truly reflecting on those little questions I had in the past that were just truly never answered, and then my dad was behaving this way, and then I was coming to terms with my own sexuality, all of it together at the same time just was, I felt very unsettled. That's why I decided very shortly, within literally probably 2 weeks of my realizing my father wasn't speaking to me, I picked up the phone. I had a choice, actually. I knew I needed to get out of Buffalo Narrows. I knew that. There was no yeah, I might as well curled up and died out there. No, I had to get out of there. I knew for my own health and my own benefit, I needed to get out of there. So I didn't know if I was going to go back to Toronto or Montreal. I had lived in both, obviously. When I thought about Toronto, I had options to go to either, because I had been trained as a weather observer in Buffalo Narrows by Environment Canada, or an outfit similar to that. They were obviously very disappointed that after all my training and only serving there for a year at this airport weather station, that they wanted to put me to use at another airport somewhere else. So when I said I was moving to them, they very quickly wanted me to go to Pearson Airport at Toronto. So there was a good job possibility there for me, and I was actually kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool, you know. Pearson was just growing at the time. I had been in Toronto before, was familiar with the city, but the more I thought about moving back to Toronto, I realized that when I had been there before, I was obviously a Jehovah's Witness, and that's who all my connections were with, was with Jehovah's Witnesses. So I knew going there I would probably be very alone. It's somewhat a very cold city. People are very into work, you know, making money. Very cold. It's not a very social city. So I was kind of a little nervous about that. And then when I thought about Montreal, I kind of did want to move back to Montreal because I felt like I knew more people. I had worked in as a sales manager in an office and for a couple of years, so I had gotten to know quite a bit of the people at this one job. And what I decided to do one day is just call this old job back and see how they were doing. Some of the managers that I had known in the past who were always very friendly to me. So I did, and lo and behold, I actually got the owner of the company who we had a pretty good relationship. He had always respected my work ethic and stuff like that. So, and I was a very good sales manager. So when he heard that I was wanting to come back to Montreal, he said, "If you can be back by January 1st, he's like, you in a month." That pretty much meant in a month, because I think I called December of 2000. So he's like, "If you can be back in Montreal in a month," he's like, "Shauna, you have your old job back. In fact, we're expanding. The office is now 3 times the size, blah, 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 blah." He was going on and pitching me into coming back. So that pretty much made up my mind. I was pretty sold, and I excitedly even told him. And it's funny because I know I said in my last video that I was going to go back to Montreal and go back to one more meeting and make my final decision. But I can kind of tell you my decision was somewhat already made, because my words to this previous employer I had was, "Oh, and by the way, remember how we used to get into a little bit of a, head-to-head regarding my availability for work, because I was pioneering before. I was devoting a lot to the ministry. He always wanted me to work more. I couldn't, because I was doing my field ministry and stuff like that. So what I did say on this phone call was, I said, when I do come, just to let you know, I will be able to give you more than just part-time. I will most likely be coming on full-time." So he just was thrilled and said, "Okay, well, get back here and you're here. You're in." So that made up my decision, and I packed up my stuff, literally packed it all up, put it on a train, and the friends that I was leaving behind were sad to see me go, but they understood. And in a way, I feel like they knew they probably wouldn't see me again, But I couldn't look back anymore. I had to look forward and move on, So I get back to Montreal. I was able actually to room, the original roommate I had originally moved out with back in when I was 17 years old. The one we had moved out with my sister and I and her. She actually had a spot. She was available. So she let me crash with her for a couple of weeks until I could get my own place. So I did. I crashed with her, and I don't think I went to the meeting. Yeah, I did. Because I didn't go to all the meetings when I was with her. I remember her probably wondering about that. And then finally I did. I went. I finally sucked it up and went to this meeting, like I said I would. And I remember just being swarmed, because it was the same congregation I was in Montreal when I left. So everyone knew me. Well, most people. So the ones that they just came swarming to me, and I just literally got love bombed, if you will. People just, "Oh my God, no, no, no." Now, at this point, I believe that they had heard that I had been disassociated, I believe, or disapproved, something like that. But it was public. It was a public reproving, and as you know, in the organization, the word gets out. Word flies real fast. So I guess they knew this, and the congregation was probably already even forewarned that I was coming, and that, because I believe they probably informed the elders where I was going and give them the whole 411 on my story and what's going on. So they could, of course, handle me with the kid gloves they needed to, But it's interesting because they held me with such kid gloves at this meeting, and I was so swarmed with oh, don't worry, Shauna, you're going to be exactly where you were in no time and all this stuff. And they just were going on, and I just, really sensed that they weren't genuine. I really did. I was sitting there feeling them and hearing them around me going on about, oh my God, don't worry, you're going to be right back where you were, and oh, this and all that. And I knew that couldn't happen. I knew that I could not ever be who I was, ever. I could never be that girl. I could never be that girl. I knew it. And I couldn't wait to get out of there, actually. I really couldn't. And even when I was listening to the talk, initially, I really thought, this is bullshit. I can't do this. This is not my truth. This is not my truth. I knew it. So I left, and I never looked back. I never looked back. And to be quite honest, I didn't even feel that they even deserved my letter of resignation or disassociation or anything like that. I just thought, you know what, for the way I've been treated here, especially by my dad, and I really felt like I was being used, when the elders in the Buffalo Narrows congregation were trying to push me to give me my privileges back and get me going, I felt like I was being used. And then when I came back to Montreal and I was in the congregation of being lump bombed and everyone was telling me I would be right back where I was, Again, I felt like they were all saying that so that I could be used again. Like I was just a tool, to be used. I was effective, yeah. I was enthusiastic, I was good in the ministry, I could talk to people, last minute talks, all kinds of stuff. I obviously had the abilities that were worthy of being a good Jehovah's Witness. But I knew now that I could never be that person again. And I didn't want to be, because it had all changed. And I knew I had searched myself enough at this point to realize that even though, according to the religion and Jehovah, that homosexuality was wrong. It just, yeah. I knew that I wasn't wrong. I knew that I wasn't a bad person. I knew I wasn't wrong. I knew that there was no reason for God, Jehovah, to despise me. That was invalid. That became stronger in me. So I didn't look back. I eventually found my own little apartment, moved out from that sister's, and I just even let that contact go. I just didn't look back. I walked away, invested in my job. I put all my time and energy there, focused there, and I plugged away. And it's ironic, I would just want to bring that up a little bit about my the job I had as a sales manager. When I first initially got that job, my boss, who saw that I had a lot of ability, said, so you said you'd never had sales experience before. And I said, no, I've never had sales experience in my life, you know? And he's like, wow, that's just incredible, because he's like, you're amazing. You're an amazing saleswoman, you know? And I thought, I wonder, that's really weird, you know? And it was really only looking forward after years and years of you know, reviewing my life and seeing that I realized, I thought, you know what, actually I have been trained in sales. Anyone who's a Jehovah's Witness who, you know, applies themselves in the ministry is taught to be the world's best salesman or saleswoman, because that's what it's about. It's all about sales. It's not selling a product, though. You're selling a lifestyle, a religion, a cult, a belief, you know? And that's what it was. I was good at that. I was good at talking to people, reasoning with them, you know, from the scriptures. I was so sold on this religion. So my joy and enthusiasm would just come out, because that's the way I am. I'm a very, you know, enthusiastic and passionate talker. So, so I realized that I was an absolute asset to them. This is why I was never disfellowshipped. This is why they were always trying to push me to, you know, to do the ministry and comment and meetings and this and that and the other. I was being used. So for any of you out there who are going through or have gone through the same thing, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. We were literally trained to be top-notch salespeople, you know, because we were selling a lifestyle, a religion, which is, you can't put a price on that, you know. If you're able to sell someone on an idea that they're so loyal to this new idea now that they will actually lay down their life. Yeah, we were taught to be pretty good at sales. And that's the truth. That's the truth. So I did want to mention that. Now, another little thing I want to talk about before we truly move on in the rest of my story, because like I said, there's more to go, even though I decided to leave and fade out. There's a bit more I want to touch on regarding my family and my father and my biological mother. And obviously I'll be touching on other things that eventually came out into my awareness after. So my biological mother, as you recall, I mentioned she found me when I was 21 years old. And that was incredible to me. It was a dream. My sister and I had been dreaming about finding our biological mother for years. I mean, my dad never talked about her. My stepmom was obviously also very close-lipped. Like they didn't say anything about her. In fact, the only time I remember my dad ever really saying something about my stepmom that I was, my biological mom, that I was really actually excited about and happy that he said it, was when I was moving to Toronto, and we were taking a drive somewhere, and it was the last time he was going to see me before I left. And he's like, well, he's like, I have to say that you are like your biological mother this way. He's like, when you put your mind to something or you make your decision, there's nothing that's going to sway you. You know, you have a very strong will, an iron will, you know. And I felt very proud of that, actually, because I thought, oh, does she? I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know anything about her. I wasn't told anything about her. I always wondered. I wanted to know, you know. So when he said that I had the will of my mother, that when she decided on something, she was doing it, I was very happy, even though he was saying it in a bit of maybe a negative overtone. I took it as being very excited about that. So I was super stoked. So my mom, she found me. She called me at the apartment I was staying. I was living with another sister in Toronto. And she says, so are you sitting down? And I said, no. Who is this? She's like, well, you might want to sit down, you know. So I did. And she's like, I'm your bio mom. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe it. So it was around this time that I believe my sister, because my sister had got a phone call from my bio mom as well, and my sister, I think, had informed my parents that she had called us. So I got a call from my stepmom, actually, and um, she actually proceeded to start warning me that, be aware and be careful that my biological mother doesn't hurt me again. And she proceeded to also convince me and remind me that she was my mother and that she was the one that had raised me, had been there for me the whole time, and all of this stuff, and so really started playing on my, on my loyalty to her and my father, and that, we, we're a perfect little family and we didn't need any help or anyone. And we're, in effect, that I was fine without my biological mother. And in hindsight, considering the amount of healing that I've had to acknowledge and face because of my abusive childhood, I'm actually shocked and appalled when I reflect on how it went down, because in effect, my stepmom convinced me to keep my biological mother at an arm's distance. So when my bio mom said, can we write and we're going to get to know each other? Obviously, initially, I was all for it. I was elated for that. It was all I'd ever wanted. And then when my stepmom, was reinserting herself into my life, making sure that I knew that under no uncertain terms that she was my mother, I believed, and I of course, I would never want to hurt them. And I mean, the convention part I was doing at the Sky Dome was all around how grateful I was to my parents, and that, in effect, everything I am is because of how they raised me and what I went through. So what ended up happening was, when my biological mother and I started writing, my stepmom had gotten so into my head. Still a sensitive topic for me because the story is not finished. She convinced me to tell my biological mother that she would never be my mother, but that she would be like an aunt to me. And I did that. In my next letter to her, my biological mother, I told her that. I said that I had a great life and that everything was fine. Not that I didn't need her, but I said, we can certainly get to know each other, but you'll be more like an aunt to me. And I got a letter back from my biological mother saying that she couldn't do it, and she was only coming back into the religion so that she could be with me and my sister, to have a relationship and gain us back. But because we were all set, we didn't need her, she couldn't do it. And she said, I'm so sorry, I can't continue writing if I can't be a part of your life the way I want. So that was the last I heard of her, from her. I've since then tried to find her, but it hasn't happened. I know that everything happens in due time, so I'm hopeful, actually, that I will find her, and I believe it will be a happy reunion. But for all the years up until last year, especially once I left the religion and I was out, and I was being shunned by, I was actually being shunned by my father before I left, but once I was officially out and being shunned by everyone, I obviously did a lot of thinking about that, and it hadn't occurred to me until just honestly months ago that my stepmom was inserting herself so strongly in my life right then and there, making certain that I knew that she was my mother and she was the one, and I didn't need, and to make sure I held her at an arm's distance, because she was afraid that if ever I did get close to my biological mother and I told my biological mother the way I was treated by her, heads probably would have rolled. Heads probably would have rolled. And I realize now that I was actually manipulated back then, because, and I carried that guilt all these years. The fact that I had turned her away, the one person I wanted to have in my life. So I faced that last year when I realized that I was manipulated by my stepmother to make sure that I pushed her away and I didn't have her in my life. So I just wanted to touch on that and fill you guys in, because I know a lot of people were worrying and were wondering actually about my biological mother and what the status is of our relationship now, which since then I haven't seen or heard her. In fact, I haven't seen her since I've been 1. So so that, kind of wraps up that story for the moment. And I think actually I will end it right there, because I've said a lot, and I will continue with the videos though, because there's a lot of little bits and pieces that come into play that will unfold as my story goes, because there's a lot more that happened even when I just left right after. So I can't thank you enough for being here with me and sharing with me on this incredible journey that we call life, and hearing my story and my experiences through the cult, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and experiencing that whole ordeal, along with much more. So I'm just really happy to be able to share it with you, and if I am able to help anyone, to know and have a little more clarity, if in their life, if they're going through stuff that are similar, then know that you're not alone. We're not alone. And from the unbelievable amount of support that I've been getting from people all over, it's just unbelievably overwhelming to me. And honestly, some of the messages touch my heart so much. So thank you. Thank you. I'm with you. Thanks.